Oh, don't mind that gate. I've got it.
Yeah, Kelso.
Oh my god! What a psycho!
Oh, you crazy son of a bitch!
New houses all being built in the path of the freeway?
Oh my god, Leland, you bitch! They're gonna build a house in the path of the highway! They're going after the fucking eminent domain money! Building movie set homes in the path of a highway? That's what this whole fucking thing was? Oh my god.
I so enjoyed our conversation.
Oh! Whoa!
Grisly end.
Oh, about time you got what was coming to you, Fontaine.
Never know. You say one more word about him and I will blow your head off!
It's about time someone told this guy off. Earl is such a fucking piece of shit. LA Noire. What an amazing game, man. I know that when you compare this game to the sales of something like GTA 5, which is quickly approaching 200 million copies sold, it seems like a failure in comparison, being that it only sits around 10 million copies sold today. But I think that isn't really a fair picture of the quality of this title. LA Noire is a super refreshing departure from the in-your-face action of almost every other game on the market. With all these games trying so hard to exhaustively hold your attention, this game takes a completely different path and rewards the player through a slow burn and great reward at the end of every single case in the game. It's a game that definitely requires patience, but if you give it the time, it is an unforgettable experience and in many ways becomes one of the greatest games that Rockstar has ever created. If you have never played this game before, I assure you, you are missing out on something absolutely incredible, and you should pick up a copy right away. This is especially the case if you're on PC, as there is finally a stable release of an open source FPS unlocker for this game. For years, what kept me away from playing this was that Rockstar has it limited completely to 30 frames per second, and it makes the game feel so sluggish and laggy, and I was never able to get past the first case because of this. But again, with this unlocker now, it transforms into a completely different game, and it's really simple to do, just as little as dropping a single file into the launch folder, and next time you start the game, it'll run at whatever the refresh rate of your monitor is. There's like a single mission that this breaks, but all you do is remove the file out of the folder and put it right back in after you get past that part of the mission, and then you get to enjoy the entire rest of the game in a buttery smooth frame rate. To get it, just search LA Noire FPS patch on Google, and you'll find the GitHub repository which has the patch in it, and it shows you exactly how to install it. A real no-brainer. One of the best things about this game is that it sort of establishes a genre of its own, being a super chill third-person shooter, which is, again, a really high-level evaluation of the game. But if you get more low-level with the analysis, you see that it's really so much more than that. Especially if you're the type that likes competitive shooters, it's so nice to come to a game like this where there's some cool action sequences here and there, but the game doesn't rely on that for its source of value. It's merely there to supplement some slower parts of the game to keep you moving along. And it's really the story and the effort they put into that in this game over the seemingly 7 years of development that makes it what it is. With all of this in mind, it really blows my mind that this genre of sort of that noir crime detective game isn't more widespread than it is. I know there are plenty of other games, but none of them really hit the mainstream in the way this one did. And it's really super impressive how this game managed to captivate an audience that is more used to in-your-face, high-pace action games. One of the things that I really loved about this game was the change of Cole's career throughout the game. You have all of the different crime desks, which goes from traffic to homicide to vice and then to arson. All of these with a different partner that has a completely different personality of their own. This really changed how the game plays throughout, as all of these partners challenge Cole in different ways. And with that, a lot of them really brought out the subtle nuance of the corruption within LAPD. Many of the cases leave you doubting if the truth was really found, and that's totally on purpose. And all of this builds into really incredible case-to-case plot development. As over time, despite how bad the Bureau ends up being, the truth does eventually come out, and that becomes really rewarding from a player's perspective. No conversation about this game is done without talking about the groundbreaking tech that this game used, at least for the time that it came out. The facial tracking and animations still look good today, over 12 years later. You do, of course, have to get past some of the textures being dated, but you really can see the emotion they were going for, and it adds such an interesting dimension to the game when you're interrogating various different people throughout the cases. Although this is really cool, it leads me to one of my biggest critiques of this game, and that is the interrogation system itself. While it is a really interesting feature, it gets super frustrating as some of the nuance that they're expecting you to pull out is a little bit out there. When I was going through the game, I found it actually a lot more fun to just use a walkthrough for a lot of these interrogations, as you don't have to replay them over and over, just sort of guessing what the game is asking you to do. It is a little cheap, but it really makes the game a lot more enjoyable, because these can get super frustrating as they were not generous with checkpoints throughout these interrogations, and you have to do the whole thing over again. The open world aspect of this game is very interesting and different than basically every other open world game I've ever played. There is a lot going on in the open world, but they specifically make it not distract from the story. There aren't really any big open world events like what you've come to expect from GTA 5, or side missions even, that you often get in some of these really expansive open world games, especially with a map as big as this game, as it is really humongous. It takes about 20 minutes of real world time to drive from one side of the map to the other, and that's pretty big, especially considering you could probably do GTA 5s in less. What's cool about this open world is that they sort of integrate it really well into the story, and the side missions really flow nicely into your main progression through the cases. These come in the form of street crimes, as they call them. And they were always a really fun departure from some of the more slow-paced items that can happen during the low points of each case. And like I said earlier, it's just really cool how they flow so naturally into the progression of the game. They're not really a side thing that's out of nowhere, which makes a lot more players more likely to engage in them, as they don't feel like just an accessory, but something that's really essential to the progression of the game and understanding what it's like to be an officer in Cole's shoes. The last and most important thing I want to go over is the writing of the different crime events in this game. They are actually super, super interesting, especially the arson case at the end of the game. Especially when you think about what the world must have been like post-war, I could absolutely see someone like Leland making this giant conspiracy to burn down all of these GI homes that were built conveniently in the path of a highway and then insured for so much more than they're worth. It's just something that you really don't see coming, and as you go through the burned down homes, you slowly put the pieces together, and the reward is just so great and so ridiculous. Like, this game really would have made for one heck of a movie, and I'm surprised that of all the games that they've turned into movies, this isn't one of them. Now, I know there are so many noir-style films, but I think the writing and how expansive the story of this was, it would really be one for the books, and a lot better than many of the other video game themed movies and TV shows that we've seen up until now. In addition to what I've mentioned before, there are a fair bit of bugs throughout the game, some of which are a little frustrating. For example, during cases, when you're trying to investigate a crime scene, there's supposed to be audio cues that more or less direct you towards where you're supposed to go and let you know if you found everything, the latter of which basically never works. The music is supposed to stop once you found every clue, and many times, even though I was certain I had found everything from looking at a guide, the music continued. It would have been really nice if they paid a little bit more attention to this fine detail, because these are really nice features in a game like this, but when they are hit or miss at best, it really takes away from the experience. Crashing is something that luckily wasn't a big deal. I did have like one crash throughout the entire game, which again is much better than a lot of other games that crash constantly, especially when they've fallen so far out of support like this one. And in the game's defense, it probably crashed because of the high frame rate I was running this game at, which was in excess of 200, something that the engine was never designed to do, so I can't really fault the game for that. Other than this though, any of the bugs are pretty minor and really don't detract from the experience that much in my opinion. One thing that definitely does add to the experience is the effort that was put into historical accuracy in this game. The recreation of 1950s Los Angeles was something that was done with painstaking detail. From all the vehicles being rendered with classic cars from Jay Leno's garage, to historical sites being recreated based on old images from the 1950s and archives that still exist today. There's a degree of realism that this game achieves that many others today still don't. And it's so cool that all the cars in this game, unlike many others like Grand Theft Auto, are actual vehicles from the time, with the respective names like Ford and Chrysler. It makes everything feel just that much more real when a suspect's vehicle is called a real vehicle that you can relate to. This always took me by surprise when playing the game, because every other video game I've ever played basically has created relative recreations of vehicles rather than the exact cars we would see in real life. Over the years, this game has been met with a lot of love and a lot of hate from the community. It seems that no one can really agree on whether or not they like this game. But what I think it really comes down to, like I mentioned earlier, is those who like slow burn in games and those who like really in-your-face action. This is a game that requires patience. It's a game that I'd even say isn't really possible to play in a very long sitting. It sort of encourages you to take a break because things do get slow. But with that, it still always made me want to come back and see what was going to happen later on in the case and in the next part of Cole's career. And I think that's really where the value of this game comes from, that it's not trying to pull you in merely through explosive action, but through a desire to see how the game is going to play out. And that's something that I really don't see in a lot of modern titles today. Maybe it's that we all just don't have the attention span for it, but I think it's a really nice departure from the status quo, and I think that a lot of people would appreciate more games like this should they come to market. I really do appreciate you all watching up until this point, and if you like content like this, please do like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video just like this. See ya.